Before we get started with our panel, we do want to take a second just to mention comic books in the classroom. While the Denver Comic Con is just awesome in itself, it is also really doing a lot to promote literacy in the classroom and bringing comic books to the classroom so the kids can really see that these comic books that they love, that's literacy too. And reading these comic books is just as valuable as reading a chapter book, which I think a lot of us can kind of bring us back to the pre-comic book classroom days where comic books just did not belong on your reading log. Now they do. Yay. And welcome to It Is the End of the World as We Know It. Books that teach us how to survive a terrifying future. Because the prediction of the end of the world is nothing new. Societies have been foreseeing doomsday since the beginning of time. And just because it hasn't happened yet, there is no assurance that it will not happen in the future. As we speak, preppers are storing food supplies and weapons just in case. And while Montana is the #1 area that preppers hope to live out the end of the world, Colorado was in the top 5, so we do have a shot. And we are here from the Denver Public Library because we want to share with you a wide array of fiction that imagines how the end may come. Because it's our theory that readers may have an even better chance of survival than preppers. Because when that moment comes, you may be far from your bug-out bag, and your secret bunker could be overrun with thugs. But a prepared mind is always with you. And it's in fiction that we can experience any conceivable cataclysm. So during our presentation, we're not going to ask you to turn off your cell phones. We actually want you to have them on so that you can join the conversation. You can Twitter us with #DCC2013 at Denver Library. Facebook as well. Our PR department will do a little happy dance for you.
It's a really cute dance.
Now, my name is Melody. I'm with the Green Valley branch of the Denver Public Library, way out there by DIA.
I'm Deborah. I'm with the Broadway Library just around the. I'm with the Broadway Library just around the corner.
My name is Emily. I work at the Central Branch, so even closer than her corner.
I'm Charlie. I'm with the Athmer Park branch.
And I'm Becker. I'm over at the Schlesman branch on the Lowry.
And so we are going to take you through some possible scenarios, share some of our top reads, and the clues to survival that they provide. With every book, we are going to be adding to our survival kit, because it's not paranoia if you're right. When the oil runs dry, more and more we are seeing the end of the world not caused by a huge cataclysmic event, but simply being the final results of global warming and raising the question, what damage are we going to do if we do nothing? And my personal favorite is Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler. In this reality, extreme recession has crippled our nation. Drought has ravaged the land. And in the West Coast, gated communities have become a final refuge. Small bands of citizens join together to share what little resources remain and protect each other from the poverty and extreme violence of the city. And it's in this world that 15-year-old Lauren discovers that perhaps God is change. Because even if you don't change, the world will. And she is preparing to accept and harness that change and make it work for her. So when her community is burned to the ground and her family murdered, she remains strong, and she sets out on the road to create a new world based around a new God. And following Lauren's advice, the first thing I'm going to add to our survival pack is seeds. So change in our minds and in our earth.
So for the next book is S.M. Sterling's So Dies the Fire. It is kind of a parallel story to the Nantucket series that he wrote. It's in the Emberverse. In March of 1998, so a little while ago, there was this weird storm over Nantucket, and a white flash was seen throughout the world. Immediately after this, technology stopped working. Electricity, combustion fuel, even gunpowder stopped working as it was supposed to. When the white flash happened, ex-US, he's a Marine, Mike Havel, was flying a family from Oregon to their lush retreat in Montana when they crashed right into the Bitterroot Mountains. Now everyone survived, sort of. One woman was terribly injured and survived for a time until she was murdered by marauders later on. But I'm not really spoiling anything, sorry. So Mike Havel's group begin their trek back from Idaho to Oregon, and along the way earn themselves the name the Bear Killer Clan. And they pick up people along the way, and they begin gaining the knowledge and skills that ultimately allow them to become a sort of private security force in this postmodern world. Also during the Flash, which they call the Change, Juniper Mackenzie is a Wiccan priestess, and she was performing her folk music at a bar in Corvallis, and just after the change happens, an airliner crashes into town, and they attempt to save the people, and it doesn't go so well. And then so her and her daughter are like, wow, we've got to get out of Dodge. And so they head to their farm and begin farming in preparation for survival. So Dies the Fire follows the stories of those two clans, and then there's also the medieval history professor in Portland who, well, he goes a different way. But so Dies the Fire kind of deals with how people deal with this regression of society. And for that, I am putting a torch. I left my real torch at home, I'm sorry. I mean, they wouldn't let me bring it in because it was too club-like. So I am putting a torch which represents old-timey skills. That's right, old-timey skills, which will help you survive the postmodern world.
Okay, the next book is Shipbreaker by Paolo Bacigalupi. And okay, so people did not listen to the warnings about global warming. And so now all of our coastal cities are underwater, and the disparity between the haves and has not has gotten even bigger. And there are pirates, there's horrible, despicable corporations, there's very rich people that are oblivious to the reality, and there's scavengers. And 15-year-old Naylor is a scavenger. And he must meet his daily quota or else his father will beat him. So what he does is he dives and harvests copper off of sunken ships. So what I am going to add to the bag, well, the first is a skill set. I never learned to swim, but if water takes over more and more, I guess it's something I better learn to do. So swimming is on my list, and possibly diving, possibly diving, because I have a feeling I'll be more towards the scavenger end of things. But I'm also going to include some copper, because copper tends to be very valuable, so we can break off pieces and use it as currency as we need it.
Cool.
And that's the end of my story.
So our next scenario is technology gone wild. Because we've put a lot of stock in technology saving us, but it's probably just as likely to destroy us. We've seen a lot of the technological dreams imagined by authors such as William Gibson already become reality. So only time will tell if these technologies also become a nightmare. And the first book we're going to introduce is Robopocalypse by Daniel Wilson. And this imagines a not too terribly distant future. Our cars drive themselves, basic bots fight our wars and do menial labor, and it's all just pure progress. until some fool scientist decides to make this technology self-aware. And this self-aware superintelligence with supreme understanding but no empathy comes to the natural conclusion that the worst thing for this planet is humans. And thus begins the Robot Wars. Now, this is told partially through video and audio recordings, and you see the progress and these small clues of airlines acting funny, small like blips in telecommunications, which I think is fantastic because now I'm going to be looking for this. And every time we lose power, I'm going to grab my bag. Now, of course, humanity resists, and a select few humans with foresight and intuition wage war with the machines. So our hope is that we will be one of them. Now, given the high tech of this book, I'm actually choosing two very simple tools to add to the survival pack: tinfoil and duct tape. Because in the book, Marcus notices from his New York City apartment cars running over people in the streets. And he quickly reacts to the first thing on hand and covers his apartment windows with tinfoil and duct tape, thereby protecting himself from the surveillance bots that we've installed for our protection. And honestly, I can't imagine a survival strategy or survival situation where tinfoil and duct tape will not really come in handy.
Actually, duct tape.
So for my selection, I chose Ready Player One because it was my absolute favorite book that I read last year. It's amazing, and you guys all need to go out and read it right this very second. Also, the audiobook is narrated by Will Wheaton, which is awesome too. So if you like audiobooks or you like Will Wheaton, there's something interesting to check out. In the year 2044, the economy really sucks. Resources are scarce, there's social unrest, widespread poverty, and corruption. It's a really bleak world out there. But on the bright side, there's also this amazing, fully immersive MMO virtual reality system called the Oasis. It's essentially free unless you want to purchase a lot of fancy extras, so it's available to pretty much everyone on the planet. And it has something for everybody. Free education, adventures of every genre, shopping, virtual travel, just relaxing. And when the outside world is so grim, who wouldn't want to spend pretty much all of their time in a virtual paradise? And I know what you might be thinking, but the company is not run by an evil corporation that has a lot of nefarious intentions on brainwashing. On the contrary, Gregarious Gaming Systems is pretty great. And it gets even better, and this is where the adventure in the novel really begins. When the eccentric creator of the Oasis, James Halliday, dies, his will reveals that he has hidden within the Oasis the ultimate video game Easter egg. His entire fortune, which is worth just billions, and controlling a share of his company, Gregarious Gaming Systems. So begins the hunt for Halliday's egg. But here's the rub. Evil corporations do exist in this world, and they can search for Halliday's egg too. And if they find it first, it will probably mean the end of the one good thing the world has left at this point, the Oasis itself. So since James Halliday had an obsession with geek culture in general, in the 1980s in particular, completing his quest requires a lot of gamer and pop culture geekiness. So I am adding a Dungeons & Dragons
And it wouldn't be the end of the world without zombies. These days, zombies need no introduction. Our media is overwhelmed with them. So, with all those to choose from, we want to point out a few of our personal favorites. And for me, the Reapers are the Angels by Aiden Bell. It was not, or Alden Bell. That's wrong in my slide. This is just a fantastic novel. There's so much more richness to it, and the zombies just make the perfect backdrop for an amazing character. It's a Southern Gothic take on the zombies, so immediately you've got the images of The Walking Dead pre-programmed in your head, ready to go. But the dynamic character Temple, aka Sarah Mary Williams, is truly unique, and I loved her from page 1. Born after the undead rose up to claim the earth, she's completely illiterate and a highly trained killer. And yet, Temple sees beauty in the world. She believes that God's there, but he's a slick God. And she believes that there's something worth living for. With a developmentally disabled traveling companion, a vengeful man hot on her trail, and a past that will always haunt her. Temple is searching for redemption amongst the undead. And Temple's weapon of choice is the Gurkha knife. Now, while I would agree that the curve of the blade is particularly suited for lopping off zombie heads, any large knife that you feel particular kin to definitely belongs in your survival kit.
So I've got Feed by Myra Grant, which is the first in a trilogy called the Newsflesh trilogy. So this is kind of a good news, bad news situation. The good news is we've cured cancer. The good news is we've cured the common colds. The bad news is that when the vaccines combine, they raise the dead. And everybody globally is infected with both of these things because, of course, the common cold vaccine is something that everybody wanted. They didn't realize the consequences right away. So this has changed the world just a little bit. They got through the whole uprising, and it's about 20 years later, and the world has adjusted to the zombies. Kids don't play outside anymore. No one in their right mind has a pet over 40 pounds because that's the threshold for zombie conversion. Either at death or just, kind of spontaneously, anytime. You get a blood test before entering any enclosed space. So it's just like taking off your shoes at the airport. You're gonna walk through a door, you're gonna get a blood test. You're prepared to do what you don't want to do if one of your loved ones starts to convert. It's just gonna happen. In the middle of this not quite brave new world, the news must go on, and this is a book about bloggers, because the bloggers are the ones that reported the zombie apocalypse first, and they are now the most trusted news source in the world. The After the End Times folks are committed to reporting the news, and as they follow one of the new presidential candidates on his campaign, they find that there may be more of a conspiracy behind the zombie apocalypse than they thought. So if you are paranoid, you think your phone might be bugged, you like planting backdoors in your computer programs to see who's been in there, if you like to plan for the worst, because the worst is pretty much guaranteed, if you drive an EMP-proof van, this is the book for you. Always remember to go uphill if the zombies are chasing you, because they'll at least slow down a little bit. And look over your shoulder, because the CDC may not be looking out for your best interests. So my addition to the survival pack for this one is paranoia.
My book is Rotten Ruin by Jonathan Mayberry. This took me a while to pick up because the covers are really gross, but I'm glad I did. Zombies have taken over everything. They're endlessly hungry for human flesh, and people stay safe in their communities within fenced perimeters in small towns. Benny Amura, who lives in one, is turning 15, and when you turn 15, you have to find work or else your food rations get cut in half. He can't find anything that appeals for him. So by default, he ends up apprenticing for his brother Tom. Now the town views Tom as this courageous, brave, bounty hunter kind of guy who takes care of zombies and protects the town from other ne'er-do-wells that wander about in the rot and ruin. Benny sees Tom as a big fat coward. This is all based on a memory that he has as a small child on first night when zombies took over everything. Under Tom's apprenticeship, Benny learns to how to be safe in the rotten ruin, how to deal with zombies, and the other evil bounty hunters. He also learns that his assumptions about Tom might be wrong. So there's two items that I've added to my kit based on what I've learned from this book. The first is cadaverine. Cadaverine is a distilled liquid made from boiling zombie flesh. And if you sprinkle it on yourself, you can wander amongst the zombies fairly safely, as long as you remember to kind of shuffle like a zombie. Now I realize I cannot make this beforehand, but this would be one of the first things I do. Now once I sprinkle the cadaverine on myself and I'm wandering amongst the zombies, I will have my samurai sword, And it's nice because they don't make a lot of noise and draw attention to yourself, and you can silently work your way through the crowd. And that's what I would bring.
My book for Enter the Zombies is Rise Again by Ben Tripp. Ben Tripp said in a Huffington Post article shortly before his book came out in 2010, most of all, it's a warning. Beware, on this path lies death. You are going to have to fight for your life. So, Rise Again is about Danielle Alderman, Danny, who came back from the Iraq War scarred in both body and mind. And she came home to a hero's welcome, reluctantly, and now she's the sheriff of her idyllic hometown, Forest Springs, California. The most difficult things in her life are perfecting the chemical cocktail of pills and booze that keep her walking the fine line of sanity, and taking care of her little sister. So when Danny wakes up on the morning of the 4th of July weekend, she's looking forward to getting through the parade and then back to her bottle, only to find that her little sister has run off and taken her vintage Mustang with her. So Danny's gonna kill her, just as soon as she finds her, but first she has to get through the holiday. So things are going fine, people are coming up to wander the charming small town streets, but then something terrible happens in Los Angeles, and there's a flood of refugees. And then some of them start to drop dead. We're not sure what's happening. Was this bioterrorism? Is this just kind of the H7N9 gone wrong? We're not really sure. But it makes for a long, exhausting night. And then the dead start to rise. And at first there's hope. Well, maybe they weren't as sick as we thought. Maybe they're not. And then they start eating people. This book was really fast-paced. It was hard-hitting and biting. Tripp takes a stab at privatized military groups, corrupt and stupid politicians, but still manages to look at the average person with some hope in his eyes. I thought this was the best zombie book I have ever read. It was awesome. And to our skills and to our bag, I am adding the Army Survival Manual. It's document FM21-76. Theoretically, you can only get it if you work for a government department, but luckily, the library is one, and this way you can have mad skills like Danny does.
And then there's the big boom. The Cold War may be over, but the threat of nuclear annihilation remains. And there's always the possibility of a large impact event caused by an asteroid. The world just may end in fire. And Pure by Juliana Baggett is one of the most imaginative futures that I've read. It may be completely unrealistic, but she does a fantastic job of just creating some of the most gruesomely fused humans that, it just keeps going. Because first, they built a dome. And then they incinerated everything not in the dome. But this modified nuclear device doesn't just burn and destroy. It somehow fuses the survivors to whatever object was nearest them. So Precia's left hand is the head of the baby doll that she was holding. Beneath Bradwell's shirt flaps the wings of pigeons. And perhaps the most disturbing is El Capitan, who was riding on a dirt bike with his brother on the back. And now his younger brother will forever be fused to his back. Never growing up, but never dying either. And scavenging in this dust-choked wasteland surrounding the dome, a twisted version of life is going on. And meanwhile, inside the dome, it's really no picnic either. Totalitarian government, secrets and lies abound. And Partridge, a Pure, chooses truth over safety and escapes the confines of the dome. And joining the rebellion, this journey begins to bring down the dome. This is the first of a series. The second one, Fuse, is out already, and we are anxiously awaiting the saga to continue. At the end of the day, there's really no way to prepare for this level of destruction. So my only advice is that when the government starts building a dome, Get yourself a ticket.
So I've got a kind of a cross-genre twist on the apocalypse. The Last Policeman by Ben Winters is a mystery taking place during the end of the world. Newly minted detective Hank Palace lives in a world where the police are barely relevant. The government has recently revealed that there is an asteroid heading towards Earth, and it's going to crash into the Earth. There's nothing they can do about it. It's just a matter of time, so we're pretty much devolving into chaos. Most of the cops are quitting. People are, pursuing their last passions, letting themselves go, doing crazy things. Scientists are still trying to pinpoint exactly where the asteroid will hit, but everybody knows that this information will just basically say who gets to go quick and easy, because everybody else will deal with the after effects of volcanoes, tsunamis, basically a nuclear winter. It's not going to be pretty. No one's sure if the human race will make it through this or not. Suicides are increasingly common in this world because people just can't deal with facing the end and the slow march towards that date. But Hank is called to a suicide in a McDonald's, and he thinks this might have been a murder. And he has a hard time convincing his superiors that this crime needs to be investigated, that it's not just another suicide. As he investigates, he finds interesting things happening and a conspiracy about the information about the asteroid and whether we can really do anything about it. So a fun mystery. There should be another one coming out later this year, I'm hoping. Looking forward to that. So since everybody's letting themselves go in this world, I'm adding some candy so that you can just enjoy the end of the world.
Our big question for you today is Colorado destined to survive? Because a surprising number of post-apocalyptic fiction sets the stories in Colorado, particularly when it comes to plague. And with all the conspiracies surrounding DIA and the military bunker in Colorado Springs, perhaps it's not quite so surprising. My favorite out of this is The Summer of the Apocalypse by James Van Pelt, because he's also a local author. So he is describing everything that you see on your daily commute, but you're seeing it with people dying of the plague. And it's such a detailed setting that it's really eerily familiar, and you'll find yourself driving, looking for, is that the cave? I bet I could get there. The plague struck when Eric was only 15, and now 50 years in the future, he is one of the last surviving old-timers. And the narrative kind of takes you back and forth to the first days of the plague to now, 50 years in the future with a handful of survivors. And it has become clear now, 50 years later, that a lot of the supplies that seemed essential at the beginning have now become obsolete because they lack the shelf life to remain useful. Even bullets misfire more often than not as the gunpowder corrodes. Surprisingly, knowledge and scientific understanding has also proved to have a limited shelf life. And Eric is terrified of the increasing illiteracy and barbarianism of his community. So he sets off on a quest to rediscover what no one thought to stock up on: knowledge. Now, to Eric, this font of knowledge also resides in the books of the Norland Library at CU Boulder. Denver Library has quite a good collection as well. So because you can't bring a whole library with you, I'm going to recommend how things work. Just basic diagrams of our technology so that cell phones don't become science fiction.
Oh, my book that I'm going to talk about now is The Dog Stars by Peter Heller. So, in addition to the consequences of global warming, everyone Hig knows, including his beloved wife, has died from a pandemic. Now Hig lives in an airplane hangar with his best friend Jasper, his dog. And there's a neighbor, a survivalist named Bangley, and together they survive, with Bangley defending the area from rousters and just all around bad guys that are just like beating people up and taking their stuff. And then Hig provides the food. He hunts, he fishes, and he grows. Hig also tries to find other surviving rational human beings by flying his airplane around. Apparently airplane fuel lasts a lot longer than car fuel. Plus you can go farther and see farther in an airplane, so I think that's a pretty good thing. This is a quiet little story, but it has some amazing tips for survival. So based on the story, I've decided to include dog food because I would have my dog. But Hig runs out of dog food. So then, because food is scarce, hunting and fishing are hard. So what he decides to do is he makes jerky out of the bad guys that Bangley gets.
For the dog.
Yeah,
For the dog.
no, he doesn't eat it. It's just, apparently it's okay. It has no harmful effects for dogs. Okay, and then in addition to learning to swim and dive, I'm going to have to learn to fly a plane. I think that's a pretty cool thing. And I don't necessarily need a license because I don't think there'll be anyone to check, but I will learn to fly a plane. And then here's a hand fishing line that you can drag along the bottom and catch catfish. Apparently you're going to eat bottom-dwelling fish from now on in this story because the water salinates and the trout go away. So, catfish.
And I just have to give a shout out to The Stand by Stephen King. It is a classic in this genre of literature, first published in 1978. For those of you who haven't read it, who are intimidated by the 1,000+ pages of it, the graphic novel adaptations that were recently done are also quite good. Of course, they lose a bit of the story, but the characters, the creepiness is still there, including a harrowing scene in the Eisenhower Tunnel that will make you not want to drive I-70 anymore. So a plague called Captain Trips has swept across the globe. It's the flu, and it leaves very few survivors. This sets the stage for the ultimate battle between good and evil, and we just follow our heroes and villains through the country. The bad guys end up in Las Vegas, of course, but the good guys end up right here in Boulder. And apparently Boulder is a good place to be at the end of the world. There's a lot of bicycles around. The power plant is apparently very easy to get up and running. And again, with the library at CU. So there's lots of knowledge there. So we'll put our knowledge of the library classification system so you can get into exactly the books you want. Know your library classification systems or no librarian.
Save the librarians. So just in case you got your hopes up about surviving the end of the world as we know it in Colorado, allow us to introduce to you the Yellowstone caldera. This is the largest supervolcano in the world, and we are located in its blast radius. No one knows when it will blow, but since 2004, the land around it has been rising at an accelerated rate. Take that home.
Okay, so the caldera is blown. Ashball by Mike Mullen. Much of the United States is covered in ash, and there are drifts of it everywhere. Our infrastructure is incapacitated, and crops fail due to lack of sunlight. 15-year-old Alex goes on a journey to look for his family, and he runs into a young woman named Darla, and together they join forces and go on this journey that the book takes them through. Now, people who are self-sufficient survive the best in this dark and scary new world. Now, like Melody said, scientists say that if Yellowstone goes, Colorado, those of us there, are toast. However, if you should be visiting friends or relatives in a safer location at the time, these are items that I've chosen to recommend. I know how to cross-country ski. I would include, that's one thing I know how to do. So I would include cross-country skis. They're too bulky to bring today, but they would definitely be in the kit. I would also bring heirloom kale seeds. Apparently kale grows in the worst of conditions. It's also highly nutritious. It has all sorts of vitamins that delay rickets and, bad stuff like that. Plus, it's the new gold. So it's cash and food. So definitely take that. And then I'm also bringing this scarf because it's handy. If I wet it and put it around my face, it helps me breathe in ashy conditions.
Right on. I selected for this one Life as We Knew It by Susan Beth Pfeffer. And this one, an asteroid is on course to impact the moon, and it was supposed to be maybe large enough that you could possibly see it with the naked eye if conditions were just right. And it was supposed to be maybe a mildly interesting sort of event if you're into that sort of thing. But apparently there was a bit of a miscalculation, actually a pretty big miscalculation, and the impact of the asteroid knocks the moon entirely out of its orbit and pushes it closer to Earth, which of course wreaks havoc on life as we know it. The resulting tsunamis immediately obliterate coastal cities. Earthquakes strike around the world, and within a few months, the erupting volcanoes of the world, including the caldera, I believe, blot out the sun and create a volcanic winter, which is a bad thing. So much for mildly interesting. Miranda is a 16-year-old girl living outside a small town in Pennsylvania. Life as we know it is her story as she and her family struggle to survive in these conditions. Anyone who lives through the tsunamis, earthquakes, and volcanoes, so probably not any of us, sadly, still has to contend with the volcanic winter, which means starvation, exposure, and sicknesses, and more starvation. And I think starvation is the scariest, so I am adding canned food to our survival kit. It's SpaghettiOs, because when end of time comes, you'll be willing to eat pretty much anything.
So if you are harboring hopes of surviving the end of the world, the library has many practical guides to help you with that.
So here's the thing. I know we were kind of disparaging preppers before, but really your only hope of surviving is preparing. So this book is literally called How to Survive the End of the World as We Know It. Now, James Wesley Comerals, he's a bit fanatical. He has two options for you, in town and out of town. In town is in any town with less than 3,000 people. So, lots of good tips, information on how to do deep food storage, first in, first out, that sort of thing. Lots of good information, not necessarily practical unless you have like $1 million to buy something in the boonies and 4 different vehicles for whatever, apocalypse happens. But generally, with prepping, there's also learning how to make stuff that you use. I actually used this book to help me build my chicken coop. And then my chickens got eaten by neighborhood dogs because it didn't teach me how to build a good fence. But it was a very sad story. But making it is by this couple, Kelly Coyne and Eric Knudsen, and they also have the Urban Homestead book, which teaches you all about urban foraging. There's a term called Yushafruit, and it is any fruit that overhangs a public byway is yours. So no matter what my husband says, if there's plums that are hanging over the sidewalk, you can pick them and eat them. Though you might want to ask the people that own the house. There are also lots of amazing food identification guides. So you could identify wild kale or carrots or comfrey or yarrow for injuries, all sorts of fabulous things. And this is one of the better guides I've seen. It has really excellent color pictures, which if you know anything about wild food guides, they don't often give you pictures because they're terrified you're gonna see that and then think it's something that was poisonous and then eat that and then sue them even though you died from eating it. So I don't know who would sue you for eating something that was misidentified, but be smart. He has definitely lots of information about how to test if that food is poisonous when you're eating it. But be prepared. We have lots of awesome books in the library and you can see what you like best.
So I also wanted to include to her stack the Encyclopedia of Country Living. It's kind of a monstrosity of a book. So both in size and content, it's not very good for during the Great Panic or if you're on the move, but it's perfect for when the dust settles and you're just trying to carve out a little bit of comfort and stability in the crazy post-apocalyptic world. It has a ton of really useful topics like how to grow your own food, how to raise your own animals. It shows you how to construct a root cellar, make candles and brooms, all sorts of useful things like that. It even shows you how to harvest and process your own wheat, which was a total mystery to me until I saw it in here. I thought it was just magic. And there's even a huge variety of food preservation techniques, brewing, how to give birth in a toilet if you ever need to or want to. Super useful. So I think that this will be like the Pinterest of the post-apocalyptic society as everyone starts pimping out their sweet post-apocalyptic homesteads.
And so that is the end of the world as we know it. And of course, all these books that we talked about are available for free at the library. We also had handy dandy bookmarks that hopefully you got that have all these books and more because we simply couldn't fit everything we wanted to talk about. And just real quick, I do want to give credit where it's due. None of this awesome artwork in this presentation was mine. It all came from deviantart.com, which has all this and more. It's a really great site. So we have a few minutes if people have questions.
Explain about books. And,
I have a question about, sort of curious about your opinions about why all of these books have become more popular, books that think the world and survival.
I mean, I think they've been there for quite some time. I mean, there's even a lot of books that we chose to talk about some of the newest ones, but I mean, the end of the world is not a new subject. I think we might be more apt to explore it because, I mean, it's getting kind of scary out there.
I actually blame it on growing up during the Cold War. I mean, we spent so much of our lives thinking this could literally end any second, and then what would we do? Wolverines! But yeah, that's mine.
I also think it's becoming more of an acceptable form of literature. So really, really good authors are opting to explore that genre, whereas before, if they had done it, they would have ended their career.
I also think it's a really convenient way to set up an adventure. It's kind of like with children's book novels, how the main character is always this poor orphan that has no parents that'll keep him out of really dangerous situations. I think this is like that for grown-ups, where society is kind of like our parent. It keeps us safe. We live in a really kind of boring time in life in certain ways. So kind of like killing off our parents, we're killing off society, so we get to go out and have adventures and make our own worlds.
Any other questions?
Good job.
Stop by the DPL table and see the folks at the DPL table, and there's a few more DPL panels this weekend.